Deep within the mountain range of the vaults, not far from the dwarf stronghold of Carrickazor, sits the Bokgorl mine, a small dwarf settlement that plays host to an equally small gold mine. Despite its size, the veins run deep, and dwarfs have mined from it for generations, supplying their home with wealth beyond measure. In all this time, the mine has gone undiscovered by the hated greenskins who roam the mountains, looking to raid and plunder whatever crosses their path. That is, until one fateful day, when a small contingent of orcs, under the leadership of the Black Orc Big Boss Crulot, stumbled upon it. Seeing an opportunity for a quick fight and some easy looting, Crulot urged the boys into battle. The dwarfs, however, are nothing if not cautious, and even though Bokgorl had never been found, they had a small contingent of warriors and thunderers at hand. As luck had it, there was also a few slayers present, who had stopped on their way to the Border Princes region to the south. Among their number was the dragon slayer Didom Steelarm, who took it upon himself to lead the dwarfs into the fight, and hopefully find a good death driving back the greenskin menace. Today's battle is a 350-point game of Warhammer Fantasy 6th edition Warbands, played between dwarfs and orcs and goblins, though no goblins will be present in today's game. Much like the Battle of Bundhafen, the dwarfs will be taking the role of defender and deploying first while taking the second turn. To counteract this, the terrain is set up in a favourable position for them, with 2 points of growing elevation and rocky outcrops strewn around the battlefield that will slow the orc advance. Leading the defence is Didom Steelarm, a dragon slayer equipped with a great weapon that has been inscribed with the Master Rune of Swiftness, letting him attack first in every combat. He is accompanied by a unit of 5 troll slayers and units of 6 thunderers and 5 warriors. The warriors are equipped with heavy armor, great weapons, and shields. In addition, hidden beneath the ground, digging a tunnel to get around the orcs, there are also 5 miners who have not yet been deployed on the table. The orc forces are led into battle by Crulot, a Black Orc Big Boss, mounted on a boar, carrying a spear and shield, as well as wearing heavy armor to give him a 2+ armor save. He has a small group of 5 Boar boys accompanying him, which he set up on the far west flank of the battlefield, while he has chosen to remain with the infantry to prevent too much squabbling within the ranks. His infantry comprises of 17 Orc Boyz, divided into a unit of 10, a unit of 3, and a unit of 4. Behind them stand 10 Orc Arrer boys, ready to rain as many arrows upon the defending dwarfs as they can. This battle will only go for 6 turns, as is the standard for Warbands games. However, there are no hidden objectives, as they would clash with the narrative behind this scenario. Instead, the victor will be determined by the points of the remaining models at the end of 6 turns. The first turn sees the orcs advancing as fast as they can, the Boar boys in particular racing along the flank to try and catch the unsuspecting slayers in the side. Unfortunately for them, the slayers are not so unsuspecting, and as they move into position to charge, Didom Steelarm runs over to the flank to intercept them, ready to sell his life dearly to defend the dwarf position. Meanwhile, the Thunderers open up on the smallest squad of orcs, hoping to eradicate them from the field entirely. Despite landing 4 hits, they only inflict a single wound. This is still enough to panic the remaining 2 orcs, who begin to flee. Unfortunately for the dwarf player, they are mere millimeters beyond 6 inches from the big unit of boys, and so their panic isn't infectious. The next turn, the fleeing boys rally, while the central unit has to wheel around a rock, slowing its advance dramatically. The other unit pushes forward, along with Crulot, who sets his eyes on the warriors. The Arrer boys find themselves in range and begin opening fire on the Thunderers, felling 2 of their number. However, they soon find themselves occupied as the miners emerge from the ground behind the Arrer boys, threatening to catch them from behind. As he closes in on the dwarf line, Crulot comes under fire from the Thunderers. His tough armor is enough to shrug off their bullets, however, and he leads the charge through the hail of lead to engage the warriors. He easily makes it into the fight, but his boys aren't so lucky, running out of steam mid-charge up the hill. Meanwhile, the Boar boys charge into Didom, ready to crush the dwarf under the hoofs of their boars. At the rear of the formation, the Arrer boys have turned around to fire at the miners who are marching towards them. They shoot down 2 miners, enough to panic them and cause them to flee, almost reaching the table edge, but not quite, where they manage to rally in the following turn. Back up the hill, the Dragon Slayer engages with the Boar Boys, slaying 2 of their number with his massive but nonetheless swift axe, and denying any of them the chance to strike back. Crulot, meanwhile, strikes down 2 of the Dwarf warriors and easily shrugs off the attack from a third. Despite their losses, neither side backs down from the fight in the Orc turn, and it continues into the Dwarf turn. That turn sees similar results, with the 2 more Boar Boys falling and another warrior going down with no attacks returned to the 2 heroes. The Thunderers change targets now, firing at the unit of 4 Orc Boys, slaying 1 and panicking the rest. The Slayers, meanwhile, charge into the fight, slamming into the Orc Boys below and managing to strike 4 of them down while taking no hits in return. Despite many sides taking heavy losses, none of the combatants flee from the battle this turn. The melee continues into the next Orc turn, the last 2 warriors being struck down at the same time as the final Boar Boy falls, leaving both champions free to roam the battlefield once more. Having seen their comrades struck down, the Thunderers have to test for panic, but manage to hold strong. Similarly, the fleeing Orc Boys regain their nerve and turn to get back into the fight. At the base of the hill, the Arrer Boys resume firing at the oncoming Dwarfs, to no avail. Confident in their allies' victory, the nearby boys turn to march away, a decision that will ultimately prove fatal in the turns to come, as the Troll Slayers, across the course of this turn and the next, strike down the Orc Boys and manage to catch them in the pursuit, slaughtering them easily, and now finding themselves halfway down the hill towards the Arrer Boys below. Didom begins hurrying back over to support the Thunderers, who fire their guns one last time at the Orc Boys, but fail to inflict any damage. As the final turn approaches, the Orc Boys begin to move around, trying to position themselves to threaten the Troll Slayers, while Crulot alone engages the Thunderers, and across both his turn and the next, manages to slay 3 of them, his Boar killing the last Dwarf. The Troll Slayers surge forward, while the miners close into spitting distance of the Arrer Boys, trapping them between the hammer and the anvil of the Dwarf formation. Didom runs towards the Thunderers in an effort to save them, but arrives too late, and the game moves into its final turn. The Orc Boys try to close the noose around the Slayers, charging at them from the rear, but the rocks get in the way of their formation, and they can't make it into the conflict. This leaves the Slayers free to charge the Arrer Boys, alongside the miners. Between them, the Orcs are crushed, with each unit slaying 3 Orcs and only losing a single miner in return. The Arrer Boys flee, but are run down by the miners. Back at the top of the hill, Crulot charges at Didom, ready to grant the dwarf his death wish. Years of conflict have made the Slayer both too fast and too tough, however, as he slams his axe into Crulot's stomach, inflicting a grievous wound, while he himself shrugs off the lone spear thrust that managed to connect, his scarred flesh too thick to be pierced. On the final dwarf turn, Didom swings again and manages to mortally wound the Orc, completely securing victory for the Dwarfs, as the 5 Orcs still standing on the battlefield melt away with the death of their boss. As the dust settles on the battlefield, the Dwarfs have secured a decisive victory, but for Didom and his Slayers, their survival in the face of so many of their own falling feels more like a defeat than anything else. Looking over the tactics used in the battle, there isn't much interesting to say about the Dwarf side of things. They adopted a simple defensive posture with a flanking maneuver in the form of the miners, and more or less everything went the way it should have. The only moment that deviated from the Dwarf plan was charging and advancing with the Troll Slayers, but that proved an effective adaptation to the battlefield conditions and contributed to their overall victory. The Orc side of the battle, however, has a few more problems that could have been fixed. First of all, the placement of the main Orc Boys was awkward. They had to wheel around a rock that slowed them down and prevented the army from arriving at the top of the hill at a consistent time. If they didn't have to wheel, it's more likely they would have completed the charge on the Slayers, and the fight might have gone very differently as a result. Another problem was the usage of the Arrer Boys when the miners arrived. Turning around to shoot at them initially was a good idea, however not turning back when they fled and effectively wasting 3 turns of shooting from the Orcs allowed the miners to take the Arrer Boys out of the fight without even properly engaging them. If those shots had instead been directed at the Slayers, the fight with the main unit of boys might have also gone a lot better for the Orcs. Finally, the handling of the Boar Boys and the decision to place Crulot with the main force and not the Boar Boys could be considered another major blunder. Crulot was placed amidst the main army to prevent animosity from causing problems. The Orc side was lucky enough to never roll a 1 on animosity, so his presence there didn't have an impact. Even if it had, however, moving up the flank with the Boar Boys to charge at Didom on the second turn and give the Boar Boys time to get around the rear of the Dwarf formation and threaten a charge on all 3 units likely would have been much more valuable. As things stood, the Boar Boys only served to slow Didom down from engaging Crulot and allow him to tear through the units, but ultimately didn't achieve much of tangible value for their points cost. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Every bit helps the channel grow and ensure there are plenty more Warbands battle reports to come. Tune in next week for the Twin River Ambush, a 450 point battle between Wood Elves and Lizardmen.